There are certain thoughts that occur to one during a Mercury retrograde that don't often occur when Mercury is direct. And there are certain thoughts that occur during a Mercury retrograde in Pisces that don't often occur when Mercury is in any other sign. And one of those thoughts that I wanted to talk about today involves the role of imagination in the face of difficulty. Let's put it that way. I'm going to tell you a story, and this is going to be a very Mercury retrograde episode, so it's going to be winding and nebulous and maybe even a little bit vague. So I'm going to try and keep it as succinct as possible. But I was driving along Alexandra Parade in Melbourne, where I live, the other day, and I was listening to the radio because I'm an old man and I like to listen to the radio while I drive. And a song came on from my youth. It was by Crowded House, and the song is called Don't Dream It's Over. And the lyrics are good and prescient when one listens to them, but the chorus really stuck with me, and it kind of put me into a space, all of this while I'm driving, mind you, but this often happens while I'm driving. It put me into a mental space where I started to consider that line, don't dream it's over, relative to the state of the world as it is. It's about midday on Friday the 13th of March 2026, and we've had a few things happen, I'm sure you will agree, in the past month or so that are making people a little bit edgy, a little bit on edge, a little bit anxious, and we're starting to see a couple of impacts of recent geopolitical events like the exchange between Iran and Israel and the United States that are starting to hit us a little bit closer to home, whether home is in the United States or Australia or the UK or anywhere else you may be listening to this. You're probably noticing that the Straits of Hormuz and the flow of global oil is starting to become unstable and problematic, and we're starting to see higher prices for petrol at the fuel pumps, and we're starting to see things starting to cost more. And I've gone on the record previously in previous episodes, including the forecast episode that I did with Lance earlier in the year, about where this period of the year sits relative to not only the year ahead, but the next several years. And long story short, I think that this particular period that we're living through right now, and which is probably going to reach its crescendo towards the end of March to the middle of April, I believe this period is going to be pivotal in terms of the state of the world for the next several years. And I think that that state is war-shaped. So we're starting to see some stuff happening on the global stage. We're starting to see the memosphere and social media, of course, reflecting this in multiple ways. We have the propaganda machine doing its thing. Lots of army propaganda, sign up to the defense forces. And I'm also seeing, aside from that obvious propaganda, some more insidious propaganda around how people are reacting to the likelihood of global conflict in the next several months, and then, of course, for the next several years afterwards and following. I'm starting to see a lot of people catastrophizing and a lot of people trying to get really granularly accurate about how the world is going to look as a result of this period of time, this pivotal period of time that we're currently living in and through. So when I was listening to Don't Dream It's Over, the two things that occurred to me were, on the one hand, don't dream, it's over. On the other hand, don't dream it's over. And like I said, this is a very Mercury retrograde episode, so I'm going to spend some time unpacking both of these perspectives. So let's start with don't dream, it's over. As in, don't dream full stop, it's over full stop. And I think this is probably one of the more direct manifestations of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries and the significations of that. So, as I've mentioned before in previous episodes, we've had Neptune in Pisces for quite some time, and we've been in the collective grip of Neptune in Pisces and all of the wonderful, dreamy, beautiful, transcendent, spiritual, blissful manifestations of Neptune, more or less at home, depending on who you agree with in the astrological world. But I think that Neptune is very much at home in Pisces. And if I was to assign it rulership, I would assign it to Pisces. So we've had Neptune very strong, very good, very dreamy, very dreamlike, and lots of manifestations that reinforce that, the rise of psychedelics and the rise of digital art and AI art being two really strong examples. And we've also had Saturn in Pisces for the past couple of years, kind of bringing some reality into that otherwise nebulous space. And then we've had Saturn and Neptune getting together in Aries, the next sign over, which is, if you know any Pisceans and any Arians, two drastically different signs, almost diametrically opposite, really. And so when Saturn and Neptune meet in close conjunction like they're at right now, we get the end of a dreamlike state. We get a bubble being burst. We get the intervention of a really harsh reality into an otherwise more or less dreamy landscape. And so we get the end of the dream. Don't dream. It's over. And that's one way of interpreting that phrase. Don't dream. It's over. Stop dreaming. Wake up. And we've definitely woken up. And that's one way in which I think that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction relative to the wider astrological landscape has influenced the geopolitical landscape. We've had to wake up, and wake up to a lot of things. What's over? I think that what we're seeing is the opening salvo of America's swan song, the United States and the global empire that the United States has run since the end of World War II, coming to an end. I think that there's definitely a lot of holes in the dream of Western liberal democracy. In the United States, the rule of law seems to have gone out the window and it's basically an autocracy. At home in Australia, we're noticing that the dream of many dreams actually have started to burst. I think there's a lot of people in my cohort, the millennials, that are seeing these latest rounds of global instability and the events that are causing that as a terminal nail in the coffin of the dreams that we were all raised to pursue. Buying a house, for instance, is completely out of my price range and probably will be for the rest of my life. And I think there's a lot of people who might have managed to find a house or find some measure of middle-class stability. And I think that dream is coming to an end and will likely be coming to a significant end over the course of the next 9 months or so. So we have, on the one hand, stop dreaming, it's over. And on the other hand, we have don't dream, it's over. This is so hard to describe in an audio podcast. But on the one hand, don't dream, full stop, it's over, full stop. That's what we just spoke about. On the other hand, don't dream, it's over. And this is something that I'm more interested in. The way that people are reacting at the moment to the inevitability of global conflict, and I believe it is inevitable, we're going into a period of war, is to start to dream that it's all over. And so on the one hand, we've got people who have struggled at the very least since 2020, to preserve some semblance of Western middle-class values and all of the pursuits that come with that. And that's got a toll that it takes on people when they're at places like work or when they're trying to live in a world that is kind of antagonistic towards the stability and the domestic bliss that is contained in the dreams that we've had to grapple with over the past decade or so with Neptune in Pisces. And World War III, which is the brand that we're being exposed to on social media, is starting to be almost welcomed by people who are dissatisfied with the way that the economy is working at the moment, is dissatisfied with their own personal lives, with the impacts of the rise of social media and the way in which quasi-parasocial friendships have developed, and the way that our social interactions have been mediated through the lens of advertising platforms, effectively, like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and many, many others. And this has caused a level of disillusion in people where they're starting to let their frustrations come out in terms of wishing or hoping that whatever World War III looks like, it's going to cause an end to the relentless grind that has very little payoff that we're all more or less kind of stuck in, at least since 2020. And so we have this dreaming of it being over and it being our way of life, the society in which we've found ourselves, that has built itself around us and that we have either directly or indirectly contributed to in its current form, which is mostly shit. And so people are dreaming that it's over. They're starting to think in terms of the end of the world being not such a bad thing. And I think that's just as problematic as a doom and gloom mentality that says, don't dream, full stop, it's over, full stop. So don't dream it's over is more prescriptive when you look at the phrase, and when you listen to the song and when you interpret that through the lens of current events. Don't dream it's over is more a warning against people who may be trying to usher in or wish for or somehow manifest some sort of global reset. The main problem that I have with that approach is that it's impossible to tell at a granular level the way the world is going to go over the next 6 to 9 months in particular, and very specifically over the next 6 weeks or so. If we were to try and imagine what the world will look like at the end of this year, for example, using our current data set, which is the way things are right now, it could be liberating or terrifying, but I don't think it would be accurate. And I think that falling into a mindset that dreams that it's over and sees global conflict and war and the impacts of that either directly or indirectly as some sort of escape from a mostly frustrating, endless grind with very little reward, I don't think that that's necessarily the healthiest response. In fact, and this is coming from an astrologer, so you'll need to bear with me, I don't think that we really should be pushing or imagining future timelines at this particular point in the journey. I think that we can only predict with clarity how our lives are going to look over the next few years at the end of May, or at the very earliest at the end of April, once whatever is building up in the global energy field manifests itself. Because what is reflected in both of these phrases, don't dream it's over and don't dream it's over, is a desire for change and a dissatisfaction with the status quo, and an anticipation based on the events of the past couple of weeks starting in early to mid-February, an anticipation that something big is going to happen in the next 6 weeks. My money is on a limited nuclear exchange between Iran and Israel, and an escalation that happens over a series of days around the middle of April that is going to be very, very scary indeed. And so for those people who dream that it's over, the reality of that coming to pass is going to hit you in the face like a sledgehammer. And for those who are decrying the end of the world and saying, you know, don't dream, it's over, it's all over, it's all over, it's not going to be annihilation. We're not going to be annihilated. But what it is going to be is an ending that doesn't necessarily look like anything we can imagine right now. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because our mind's ability to terrify us, to keep us in a state of nervous exhaustion because we're anticipating the end of the world and trying to imagine what that looks like, that's not good for people. That's not good for people who can fall into those kinds of repetitive ruminations about disaster. And astrologers are famously bad at being optimistic. I'm not going to try and deliver a false optimism right now. In fact, I'm probably not going to try and deliver any kind of prognostic interpretation of a prognostic landscape until, like I said, the end of May, or at the very earliest, the end of April. But what I can say is that looking at that phrase, don't dream, it's over, the commonality here is don't dream. And rather than waking up and trying to accept that the way things are at the moment is going to dictate the way things move into the future in terms of positive or negative outcomes to this situation in the Middle East, that's not going to be helpful. It's just going to freak you out. And so I guess this episode is a little bit of a public service announcement, in as much as I'm advising people to just remain in the present moment. That is not a cop-out, that's not bypassing. That's the easiest and gentlest way to wake up. You don't want to wake up from a dream into a nightmare, because dreams and nightmares have a place, but that place isn't in waking reality. And so I guess the directive, don't dream, we can add to that, wake up. And rather than spending our waking lives daydreaming about the end of the world, remaining present and remaining focused on what you can see in terms of impacts in your immediate sphere of influence, not at all online on social media, because that's just not going to be a reliable channel of information moving forward, and hasn't been in the past for quite some time now. But focusing instead on your local neighborhood, focusing instead on your family, your loved ones, your kids, your husband, wife, partner, whatever, your friends, the people that you have existing, tangible, waking life connections with, is going to allow you to feel a little bit more like you're connected to others and not isolated in a social media silo, engineered silo of isolation and terror. Not entirely sure whether there's a moral to this story or not. It's just don't dream it's over and don't dream it's over are two very different ways of approaching the current period in time. And I just thought that the song that I heard and the way that music has a way of communicating emotion as well as insight and wisdom, I thought it was quite prescient and I wanted to share that with you. So I'm going to post this. I'll probably edit the shit out of it so it doesn't sound so much like a Mercury retrograde in Pisces rant. But for what it's worth, that's it. And I just want everyone to be gentle with themselves, be gentle with each other. And if the worst possible thing happens and we're all confronted with a radical ending of whatever sort, remembering that the only thing that matters in the end is love and kindness will put you in a better stead than trying to react to an imagined future that has not happened yet and that is not going to look anything like what you're expecting. Until next time, folks, take it easy. Ciao.